Your phone buzzes. A friend. An invitation. A gathering. And you feel it. That quiet pull in your chest. Not dread. Not quite. More like being asked to leave a warm room and step out into the cold. So you make an excuse. You say you're tired. You put the phone down. And then something strange happens. You feel relief. Not guilt first. Relief first. And then, almost immediately, the guilt shows up. Because what kind of person feels relieved to stay home? What kind of person is genuinely happier alone than in a room full of people who care about them? Here's what I want to tell you. That relief isn't a flaw. It isn't loneliness in disguise. And it isn't something you need to fix. It's actually one of the most psychologically significant things about you. Today, we're going into the real psychology behind people who feel most alive when they're alone. Not the surface version. Not just, oh, you're an introvert. That's too simple. And honestly, it misses the most interesting part. By the end of you'll understand exactly why your brain is wired this way. Where it comes from. What it actually says about your inner life. And why researchers are beginning to see it, not as a social deficit, but as a distinct cognitive strength. Stay with me, because the most surprising part comes later, and it will completely change how you see yourself. Before we get into psychology, I want to plant something in your mind. There's a body of research suggesting people who prefer solitude are not less socially capable. In many cases, they're more emotionally attuned than almost anyone in the room. More perceptive. More capable of deep connection. They just choose not to spend that capacity on everyone. We'll come back to that. Hold on to it. Because it reframes everything I'm about to tell you. Let's start with biology. Because this is where most explanations stop too early. You've probably heard the word introvert. Yes, most people who love solitude are introverted. But introversion is just the label. The deeper explanation is what's happening underneath it. Psychologists call it optimal arousal theory. Here's the basic idea. Every human nervous system has a threshold. A level of stimulation where it functions best. Too little, you feel bored. Restless. Too much, you feel overwhelmed. Drained. That threshold is different for everyone. For people who thrive in loud rooms, constant movement, non-stop energy, their nervous system needs more input to feel good. The noise. The chaos. Other people's energy. That's fuel for them. But for people who feel most alive alone, the threshold is lower. Their nervous system reaches its optimal point with far less stimulation. Which means a crowded room doesn't energize them. It overloads them. Not because they dislike people, but because their system is already running at full capacity. Think of it this way. Some cars need a bigger engine to run. Others run on something smaller, more efficient. Neither is broken. They're just built for different conditions. And home. Quiet. Familiar. Controllable home. That's the environment where their engine runs best. But there's something else going on. And this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. People who prefer solitude tend to have what psychologists call a highly active inner world. Not just thoughts. A rich, vivid, internal landscape. Ideas. Emotions. Memories. Imagination. All of it, genuinely engaging. On its own. For most people, boredom kicks in when there's nothing external to focus on. The silence feels empty. So they reach for the phone. The noise. The company. But for someone who loves being alone, silence isn't empty. It's full. Full of thoughts they want to follow. Observations they want to sit with. Emotions they actually want to feel, instead of rushing past. Psychologists call this high internal self-presence. A deep, strong connection to your own inner experience. And it isn't just a personality quirk. Studies show that people who score high in this trait also score significantly higher in creativity, self-awareness, and something called integrative complexity. The ability to think in nuance. To hold multiple perspectives at once. To see what others simply miss. In other words, the same person who turns down Friday night plans is often the person doing the most interesting thinking on Friday night. Now, this is the section that tends to hit people the hardest. Because this preference, this deep love for solitude, it doesn't just appear out of nowhere. For many people, it has a history. A quiet, specific history that started long before they were old enough to name it. Picture a child growing up in an environment that feels unpredictable. Maybe the home was chaotic. Maybe love was inconsistent, present one day, distant the next. Maybe that child learned early that other people's moods were something to monitor, not just experience. So they got very good at watching, listening, reading the temperature of a room before even stepping into it. They learned to feel safe inside their own head. Because inside, things were consistent. Inside, they had control. Psychologists call this hypervigilance when it develops as a stress response. The nervous system, permanently alert, scanning, always scanning. But over time, for many people, it stops feeling like anxiety. It becomes a preference, a learned love for the stillness and predictability of their own company. And the home environment reinforces all of it. It's familiar, controllable, free of the social performance that exhausts them everywhere else. No masks required. No energy spent managing other people's expectations. For this person, home isn't where they hide. It's where they finally get to exist without effort. Think about what it actually feels like to be this person at a social event. You're there. You're smiling. You're present. You're even enjoying moments of it. A good conversation, a shared laugh. But underneath, there's a quiet ticker running. A kind of background countdown. You notice things others don't. The tension between two people across the room. The way someone laughs is slightly too loud. Trying too hard. The friend who says, "I'm fine," in a tone that clearly means they aren't. You're absorbing all of it. Not consciously. It just comes in. And by the time you get home, close the door, sit down in the quiet, you're not just tired from being out. You're tired from feeling everything that happened. An entire evening of emotional data, settling into your system all at once. That exhale you feel? The one that only comes when you're finally alone? That's not antisocial. That's your nervous system releasing a full load it's been quietly carrying all night. And here's what the people who love you but don't quite understand you might not realize. The reason you sometimes can't explain why you're drained isn't because something is wrong. It's because being deeply perceptive in social environments is genuinely, physiologically exhausting. In a way that's almost impossible to put into words. Let's talk about the part nobody names directly. The judgment. You never come out anymore. You're going to end up alone if you keep this up. Don't you get lonely? And then, the more insidious version. The internal version. The voice that's absorbed every message society has ever sent about the good life. The full calendar. The highlights. The constant movement. And turns it inward. Maybe I'm wasting my life. Maybe this is avoidance. Maybe something is wrong with me. Here's what I want to say directly. There is a real important distinction between solitude and isolation. And it's worth being honest with yourself about which one you're actually in. Solitude is chosen. It fills you. You come out of it feeling restored. Clearer. More yourself. You have people you love. You let them in, even if they're few. You could go out. You just genuinely prefer not to. Most of the time. Isolation is different. It's driven by fear. It contracts your world over time instead of enriching it. You feel lonely inside it, even if you don't admit that out loud. You avoid it not because it restores you, but because the alternative feels too heavy, too risky, too much. If you're in the first category, and most people watching this are, then the guilt you feel is not your own. It's borrowed. It's the voice of a culture that decided extroversion was the default, and everything else was a problem to be solved. It isn't. But if home has started to feel less like a sanctuary, and more like a place you're stuck in, that's worth paying attention to. Not with shame. With honesty. Knowing the difference between the two. That's a form of psychological clarity most people never develop. Now, remember what I said at the very beginning? That people who prefer solitude are often more socially attuned, not less? Here's what the research actually shows. Studies on solitude and self-awareness found. People who regularly spend time alone, intentionally, comfortably, score significantly higher on measures of emotional intelligence. And on something called social cognition, the ability to accurately read other people's mental and emotional states. Why? Because when you spend time alone, you spend time inside your own emotional experience. You become fluent in the language of internal states. And that fluency translates directly into reading other people with unusual accuracy. The person who seems least social is often the most emotionally perceptive person in any room. They're just quiet about it. And it goes further. Research on solitude and creative output shows people who are comfortable alone produce more original thinking, more integrative problem solving. They report higher levels of meaning and purpose in daily life. Not because being alone is magic, but because sustained, uninterrupted time with your own mind is where the deepest thinking happens. Always has been. The world's greatest writers, philosophers, scientists, artists, they protected their solitude fiercely, not because they disliked humanity, but because they understood something. Their greatest contribution to humanity came from the hours spent away from it. So here's the reframe. The reason you feel most alive alone isn't that you're missing something, it's that you've built something. Something most people haven't. An inner life. A genuine, rich, sustaining inner life. That doesn't need external entertainment to feel meaningful. Most people have never sat quietly with themselves for more than 10 minutes, without reaching for a screen. Not because they're shallow, but because they haven't developed the relationship with their own mind that you have. You have. The coffee in the morning with no noise. The way a certain book pulls you completely out of the day. The long, wandering thoughts at 11 p.m. That feels more alive than most conversations you've had all week. The specific, private joy of a Saturday with nowhere to be. That isn't a small life. That's a cultivated life. Built around depth over volume.